Hello everyone and welcome to this tutorial on creating the best ever brand plans. Once you are aware for a given brand of all the strategies and assets available, in other words, once you know what is available in terms of innovation, advertising, merchandising programs, on and off trade programs, it's time for you to build your brand plans and activity grids. And here what you want to do is to create the best possible brand plans, especially by avoiding all the common mistakes that we see when we review the brand plans for markets all around the world. And this is where this tutorial can help. We have created for you a set of 10 principles to build the best ever brand plans. Some of these principles may sound obvious and simple to you, and that's okay because there is nothing wrong in revising the marketing principles and marketing basics. Some of those may surprise you, and that's a good thing. These principles are not just my own, François Bazini's personal opinion. No one would care about what I think. But they come, in fact, from three sources. The first of these sources is marketing academic research. We have used the work done by researchers like Byron Sharp, Mark Ritson, Jenny Romaniuk, consulting firms like McKinsey or BCG, or even data vendors like Kantar or Nielsen, to come up with those 10 principles. Second, to ensure we also had learning specific to our categories and spirits, we have also conducted our own marketing return of investment studies called MCA in the UK, in Germany, in France, in Spain, in Russia, but also in India, in Australia, and even in the US. And lastly, we have used our own experience. You can imagine that working in the international region, we see every year plans from about 50 countries on 2 or 3 categories each. That's a huge number of plans, allowing us to better detect the best practices and also the most common mistakes made by markets when they build brand plans. With these 3 sources, academic research, our own MCA research, and our experience reviewing hundreds of plans, we have defined 10 questions to take your brand plans and activities from good to great. So first of all, because strategy must come before tactics, the first questions to ask yourself are related to the investment focus. In other words, the where to invest. There is a fascinating research done by McKinsey that shows that categories where you play matters more than how you play. I'd like to pause here because this is an incredible findings. It means that good managers don't beat bad markets, but you can beat competition by investing in the right growth segments and in the right growth areas. Think about for Beam Suntory, think about categories like peated malts, VSOP cognac, bourbons. Because those categories are growing, you will beat competition if you invest disproportionately in those growth areas and growth segments. As a result, the first question you should ask yourself when reviewing your brand plans and activity grids is, are we investing enough behind growing brands in growing categories? But it's not only about categories, it's also about geographies. Think about touristic areas for an illustration. In Spain, for example, in Barcelona, there are 17 million tourists per year, and they come from Germany, they come from the UK, from France, from the US. That's almost 5 times the population of that city. So if you are able, in those touristic areas, to get the look of the leaders, to break through the clutter of competition, it will have a big impact on your business. So naturally, the second principle of building the best brand plan is, are we focusing on hot places like key cities and touristic areas? Now, a dimension marketers often ignore is pricing and format. They leave pricing and formats to the sales team. They don't think it's noble enough for them. It's a big mistake. It's a big mistake because, for example, in non-alcoholic beverages, having the right packs at the right price points, it was the most successful companies consider their main growth driver. Coca-Cola, for example, is a master at doing that. They have a pack format a can or a bottle for almost every price point, making it impossible for private label or even competitive brands like Pepsi to do real serious business. So asking yourself, what are, in a given market, the price points where most volumes are made, or the price points where volumes are growing, and identifying how we're going to play on those price segments is very critical. In particular, one often overlooked growth lever are large formats and fractionals. Increasing distribution of those large formats and those fractionals is an efficient way to play at those hot price points and price segments, and also in a way to tap into new consumer occasions. As a result, question number 3 is, are we covering key price segments with the right brands and formats? So this was about the where to invest, the strategic focus. The next question is about the when, and marketers don't think often enough about the when because there are a lot of learnings about the when to invest that will drive the quality of your plans. In consumer goods, research shows that success is driven by ensuring strong presence at a handful of key weeks or even key weekends. For example, at Pepsi in the US, where I have worked for a year, what was making the difference between a mediocre year and a great year, between a year where we were going to miss budget and a year where we were going to meet budget, was the ability to get the 4 critical weekends. In that case, Super Bowl, the May barbecue Memorial Day weekend, July 4th, Independence Day, and the back to school Labor Day in September. Therefore, a good place to start is to identify the key weeks and weekends in your country for the brand you are dealing with, and then check if we're investing disproportionately more above the line, below the line, on trade and off trade promotions, and even if we are coordinating with the global travel and retail team. And if you say have only 30 or 40% of your accounts in off trade with meaningful promotions at those key periods, it is a warning signal. It's not enough. To get, quote unquote, to get those weekends, you need 70% plus of your accounts doing an activity in those weekends. As a result, another key question you want to ask yourself is, are we clear on what the key periods are and are we investing enough behind them? In terms of timing, another learning is that you achieve the best return, the best bang for your buck, when all the activities are happening at the same time. Marketers often make the mistake of spreading activities and investments all year long, horizontally, if you will, to always have something happening. I think it's to reassure themselves they want to have something happening in March, in May, in July, in September, in November, in December. It makes them sleep better, but no one cares about their sleep quality. Marketing science has proven repeatedly that return of investment is much, much higher when several activities happen simultaneously, vertically. For example, when your advertising happens precisely the same weeks as your on-trade events, as the displays and gift boxes are on the floor in the off-trade, and even in sync with what is happening in global travel and retail. Research has shown that return of investment can be up to 40% higher when marketing activities are synchronized. In other words, vertically coordinated on those key weekends or key weeks we just talked about. Hence the question, is our plan vertical and well synchronized and too horizontal, and not too horizontal? After the when and the when, we can turn to which activities to run. The learnings we have from marketing science, but also from the MCAs and from our own experience reviewing brand plans, is that it should be fewer, bigger, better. Fewer, bigger, better. That's what it boils down to in the end. Fewer, bigger, better. Detailing this a bit, when it comes to choosing the activities to focus on, An important question you should ask yourself is, are we focusing enough behind core marketing programs? Again, it sounds obvious and easy, but then would you believe that when we do marketing return of investment studies in our key markets, even the sophisticated ones, we find that between a quarter and a half of all marketing investment is wasted on activities below the visibility threshold level. A threshold level is the minimum level of spending needed on an activity for it to be seen by consumers. Too often, markets spend too little on activities for consumers to even notice, which results in wasted brand investments. If you invest on activities below a certain amount of spending, it's as if you had done nothing. The money is entirely wasted. If you combine the fact that between a quarter and a half of the brand investments is wasted on activity below minimum spending levels, with the fact we saw before that you can gain 40% impact by synchronizing activities, you see that you can almost double your return of investments by focusing a bit on bigger activities, eliminating small ones, and synchronizing those big activities. In order to spend more on meaningful activities, of course, you need to eliminate some activities altogether. You know the analogy of the jug. The only way to fit in a jug big stones, small stones, sand, and water is to start with the big stones, then the small stones, then the sand, and then the water. If you start with any other way, if you start with the sand or if you start with the water, you will fail and you will make a mess. In your case, the big stones are the must-do activities, the advertising program, the innovation launch, the big merchandising programs like we have at Beam Suntory behind Bourbon Legends or Peanut Malt of Distinctions, or the highball programs. These activities must be funded first and foremost and funded well before you add anything else. Therefore, the principle number 7, in order to make room for these big rocks, for these marketing activities and business priorities, you should eliminate the small ones. Think about these small social media programs, those complex activities like partnership or costly activities like PR events. They are often very time consuming, they represent a lot of non-working brand investments, and they are often not big enough to be above the visibility threshold. In other words, although your junior marketeers have fun organizing them, there are a lot of costs and efforts for a very limited impact. Also think about those legacy activities, PR programs and sponsorship events that you have done for years, and make an effort to measure their return of investment. We can help you do that, and I'm not saying they are all bad, but more often than not, you will be surprised that they should not be part of the plan. Beyond the marketing activities, there are also business levers. As you build your brand plan, you should analyze carefully where your growth has come from in the past 2 years. Was it through off-trade distribution gains, on-trade distribution gains, more aggressive pricing and promotions, innovations? There are not that many levers possible. And once you have done that, you need to assess if these growth levers can be relied on to fuel future growth, or if you should find new sources of growth. Again, sounds easy? Well, not so much, because I would say that by experience, only 1 in 5 brand plans I see from markets, even sophisticated ones, only 1 in 5 brand plans does a good job in analyzing growth and therefore focusing on the right levers. You want an example? We had recently a brand plan from one of our key markets, and that brand plan was not identifying the what generated the most growth in the past 2 years. As a result, they were recommending to put all the brand investment behind a big advertising program. When we asked them to go back and identify what generated the growth, they realized that it was distribution gains in bars and restaurants. And that in bars and restaurants, we still have a lot of room to grow and to gain further distribution. Therefore, they came back with a plan to voluntarily invest more behind bars and restaurants to gain distribution. That plan is much more solid because it relies on the proven levers for growth and at least is knowledgeable about what drove past growth in order to inform the future strategies. As a result, another crucial question is, are we investing enough behind our most reliable business levers? Once you know the marketing activities to focus on, once you have eliminated the nice to have and unnecessary activities that cost a lot and don't have much impact, and once you know the business levers, innovation, advertising, distribution gains, once you know the business levers to pull, it's time to define the targets. Studies after studies, marketing research has shown that growth depends on the ability to recruit new users, and that nothing beats powerful marketing activities with broad targets. The most common mistakes we see are marketing plans that only target younger consumers and millennials. Well, we know that in many categories, and in spirits in particular, and especially in developed markets and developed economies, sales come from a much broader target group. For example, in our flagship brand Jim Beam, in one of our biggest markets, Germany, do you know the percentage of consumers that are above 50? Would you think it's 15% of consumers, 25% of consumers, or 30% of consumers? Well, in fact, the real number is 55% of consumers. And it's also above 50% of the total consumption of Jim Beam that is done by people over 50 years old. And guess what? Many of the plans we receive or were received in the past from Germany were still targeting only millennials and do not communicate anything to people over 50 or even over 40. Not targeting the majority of people who buy your brand or are likely to buy your brand has a name. It's called bad marketing. I'm not saying that the target are always old or that you should definitely target only older people, but I urge you at the very least to look at the numbers and to not default automatically to target people under 29 years old. And please do me a favor. Don't believe another frequently used line by agencies that said that you should target millennials because it will be inspirational for all the targets. It does not work like this. This is agency baloney. Do you really think that people like Barack Obama, George Clooney, or Brad Pitt aspire to be just like Justin Bieber? It's much simpler. If you do not talk to people who are likely to buy your brand, they simply will not buy your brand. Also avoid the trap of believing that a very targeted program, those that reach only a few dozen of consumers through PR or events, for example, will, through word of mouth, then miraculously generate the returns that you're after. Again, it does not work like that. Word of mouth is not generated by a handful of consumers, of loyal consumers or fans of your brands. Research has shown that surprisingly, word of mouth is generated by large numbers of new consumers, which reinforces the need to target a broad audience. So to sum up all that, an important question to ask yourself is, are our marketing activities targeting a really broad audience? A recent Milward Brown research has explicitly shown that consumer experience with the brand trumps the attitudes toward the brand. In other words, consumers care less about brands than we marketeers do, and they tend to love the brand they have experienced, not experience the brand once they love it. It is a sobering reality to always keep in mind. Consumers care about the experiences they have with our brands. It means that ensuring our drink strategy is crystal clear and really well focused is absolutely fundamental. And when it comes to touch points, our MCA research and return of investment research that we have conducted in many markets show that the most impactful touch points are things like branded menus in bars or bartender recommendations, probably because they impact consumers seconds before they make their purchasing decisions. Therefore, the key to successful choice of activities is to ask, are we spending enough behind our drink strategies and activities? So to sum up, once your first iteration of brand plan and activity grid is written, if you ensure you can answer yes to all the 10 questions we have walked through, I can guarantee that your plan will be very efficient and will generate the results that you're looking for. Thank you.